Hi there, this is Luis.
And I'm Diana, and today we're going to be talking about murder mysteries, both murder mysteries in movies, as well as maybe some TV shows that are on now, and true crime murder mysteries that are happening now or that have happened in the past years. So, Luis and I reviewed a couple movies, including the one called Murder Mystery on Netflix with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. Then we watched Gone Girl, The Fugitive, and then I watched a documentary called Sophie, A Murder in West Cork. He watched American Murder, The Family Next Door, and of course, everyone's talking about the story of Gabby Petito. So, Luis, where were you when you heard about Gabby?
Well, I think the story's like maybe like 2 weeks old, more or less, and I really hadn't heard about it all that much until maybe like a few days later, when even the Spanish news were covering it, and that's when I heard it because my mom was like listening to the news. So I was home when I first heard it, and it was probably like 5:30 to me, more or less, because that's when the news comes out. So that was like the main story. So I was home, and I was just like surprised that there was so much coverage going on, and I didn't know much about it, and then I kind of like heard it, and it kind of filled us in on it. So I got to know a little more, and that was super interesting. What about you? Where were you when you first heard about this?
Well, I actually didn't know much about it till maybe a little over 2 weeks ago. When I sent my cousin, she's really big into murder, like true crime stories, and she's the one that got me onto Crime Junkie. So I sent her this like news link about the one that they were gonna have. 2020 was gonna have one
Mm-hmm.
about a serial killer in
Mm-hmm.
Stanford or somewhere.
Right.
So I sent her that link, and then she sent me the Gabby Petito one, and she said, "Have you heard this one?" And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "No, not really." And then I sent her another link and said, "What about this one? This one sounds like an interesting one." And it was about this guy who a bunch of people in his family have died. His
Wow.
wife, his son's girlfriend in a boating accident. And so I thought this case, that one that I sent her was pretty interesting, and she did too. But then after she mentioned the Gabby Petito one, it was like blazing like
Yeah.
fire, like it was
Yeah.
everywhere.
Exactly.
So, of course, when we were picking something to do for a show, I kind of was like, maybe we should do murder mysteries because I love true crime stories. I mean, I don't really love it when it happens,
Right.
but they're very
Interesting
interesting.
for sure.
That's our culture, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is very interested in murder mysteries and just those kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So that was it.
No, for sure.
Yeah, so anyway, I have a question for you right now. Besides what I just asked you where you were.
Uh huh.
Um, okay, so if you murdered someone and suddenly the FBI were all over your case, how would you feel?
Mm, mm, well, first of all, that's kind of a crazy question. But I mean, I wouldn't murder anybody. Like, I never even would want to think that, right? But if I was in this guy's shoes, well, for sure, I'd feel like regretful. I'm assuming, like especially after everything's kind of, and it's not just the cops at this point. It's like the whole world, like the whole media is focused on him. So I don't know. I just
Wait,
feel.
you we're not saying anyone murdered anyone. I'm saying if you
If
murdered
me,
someone,
me
how
myself,
would you feel if the FBI were all over this case?
wow, well, I'd feel like regretful. If it was me, I'd feel like regretful. First of all, I never would do it, right? But if it was me and the cops were all after me, I'd feel like, well, trapped. I'd turn myself in for sure if that was me. Um,
Okay.
hmm
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, I think as visually impaired people, and you can be assured that most blind people are not going to be out there trying to murder people. Because first of all, we would be like the worst people to
Yeah.
murder anyone.
Right.
We would leave all kinds of evidence,
Yeah.
and it would be harder to do. Plus,
Exactly.
I think in most cases, I haven't heard of many visually impaired or blind
hmm
people being murdered either. I think people in a way, people might take pity on the blind
Right.
and say,
I would hope
nah, they're too
so.
easy.
Well, I would hope so
So then
because
they just don't do it.
I've actually heard of people that are blind that have been robbed. Like when they get on like Uber or something, like which is crazy.
Maybe a murderer or a
Oh,
robber
okay.
would go that way, but they would never like
Okay.
kill them.
I
They
would
would
hope
probably just
so.
like, eh.
Yeah.
They
Oh well.
they can't do much to me anyway.
Right. Well,
So
they're blind. They can't identify me in front of the cops or something. At least, hopefully, that's their thinking.
yeah, so there's no reason really to murder someone who's visually impaired or blind. They just
Yeah.
kind of let you go,
I'd hope
kind of
so.
thing.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Anyway, so we're talking about Gabby Petito, and maybe there are some people that have no idea what we're talking about. So could you maybe do a recap for us or tell us what this is about?
Okay. Well, I'll just kind of cover it in general since we're gonna be talking about it like later, more in depth with more detail. But pretty much, this was she was like an upcoming social influencer. So she has like YouTube videos, TikTok, and Instagram stuff like that. So she's 22 years old, and pretty much she has a fiance who's also into social media himself. So for 2 months, they were like traveling, I guess, the country in a van kind of thing. And what happened is that she ended up missing like not too long ago. So there was this whole like missing report going on, and then they eventually found her body, and now the fiance is like the main suspect. But apparently,
Basically, like you said, they were together on
yeah,
this trip,
right,
and suddenly he just came home without
right,
her. Like,
exactly,
no big deal. She's
yeah.
somewhere. I
And
don't know where.
right, and he went
So
to his
yeah.
parents' house. So, and it was like a long time between like the missing report. So it's kind of there's a lot of fishy stuff, which we'll kind of like cover more a little later. But it seems like the parents are kind of like covering up for him also because of just the situation. And again, we'll like be more detailed a little later. But that reminds me of something or a question I want to ask you. Like,
Okay.
okay, let's say you were in that situation. Like, do you think your parents would turn you in, or would they be like covering up for you if it was you?
Oh my goodness, my parents would like totally turn me in because
Uh,
my brother has been in trouble before, and other people around us
uh,
have. And I think my mom was like, I don't know what mother would cover up for their son. Like one time, I think the cops were looking to talk to my brother because they had questions for him about something, and he's like, "Don't tell them I'm here. I'm in here and I'm gonna hide." And when they came and they asked for him, she's like, "He's here," and I think he ended up probably spending a night in
uh,
jail because
right,
of whatever it was. But she was like, I'm not going to cover up for him. If he got himself in trouble, that's his problem. So,
exactly.
no, like my parents would definitely not cover up for me or
Wow.
anyone else in my family. So,
Yeah, well,
that's just how they.
especially for murder, that'd be like a big one.
Oh, no kidding. And they could get in so much trouble
Oh
if they're
yeah,
withholding evidence,
exactly.
which it seems like they could be. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
In this case, I feel like this is definitely not under the radar. So if anyone who's involved in this case thought they could get away with anything,
Right.
I think you're going to be totally surprised because there's a lot of technology that has played a key role in solving most of the mystery behind this case, and I think will continue to be that. Like, for instance, there's phones, tablets, GPS, smartwatches to consider, as well as video and surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts with people that have their own technology
Hmm.
and video. So, yeah, so we're going to be talking more about that a bit later, like we were
Right.
mentioning, because we want to really get in depth with this. But we also need to talk about some of the movies that we watched or were inspired to watch because of all these true crime stories
Hmm.
and things happening in our real world. Yes, so we're talking right now about Murder Mystery, a movie with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. And this movie came out in 2019 in Netflix. And I hear that they're making another one, or
Oh
maybe
wow.
there already is another one. So, what is about and what is your rating?
My rating for this movie is like a two, maybe like a 2 stars, 2.5, maybe 2.5 stars. I didn't really. It's very like corny, cheesy. I mean, it's watchable, but it's very forgettable. It's kind of cringy at times. So yeah, my rating for this would be like 2.5 at the most.
So Luis is rating the movie before he even tells us about it, which is not the way to go
Uh,
if you want people to maybe be interested in the movie. So,
right.
all right, just tell us what the movie's about and why it is that you already told us why, but
Yeah.
just tell us what it's about in case anyone might be interested in seeing Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler together.
Right. well, yeah, pretty much like they're like a married couple celebrating like their anniversary, and it's kind of like uh, they love each other, but it's kind of like they're I don't know. She's kind of disappointed, I guess, that he's not so romantic or whatever. And he says he's like a detective, so she gets invited to like this kind of like a cruise or like this yacht or like a ship kind of thing, right? And then by
Well, I think he surprises her with
mhm,
a honeymoon trip that she's always wanted, like an anniversary trip,
right,
because she just keeps expecting him to do it, and finally he kind of just gives in because I think she's like mentioned it so often. But then when they end up on this airplane, then she ends up meeting someone that seems to have a lot of money, and on
uh
the
huh,
plane, then this guy invites them on this trip, and she's like, "Well, this sounds better than what we were gonna
right.
do, so we should go." So that's what happens, right?
Yeah, yeah, you know the
So
movie
they
better
end up,
than me, right? For sure, right.
and this person that they go with is kind of like the black sheep in the family,
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Yeah.
And so they end up like basically I think Luis is at a loss for words here because he kept telling me that he'd watch bits and pieces of this movie and then he'd take a
Well, yeah,
so
I
he
was.
found his movie that he thinks he's going to be napping through anytime that he's not sure if he can fall asleep. He's going to turn this movie on, he says.
Oh yeah,
So
I found the cure for insomnia, and this is it. But
So
yeah.
I guess let me just say what this movie's about, since I think he kind of like was like not really in tune with it. Like I feel like this movie was a lot like those they have the mystery trains or
Hmm.
the mystery murder theaters, where you go
Yeah.
and you pay for a meal and then somebody gets murdered there and you're supposed to solve like who did it.
Yes.
So they end up in this situation where they're in this on this cruise and they're with a family and they're the only ones that haven't known these people for a long time, and right away somebody gets killed, so everybody's trying to figure out who it was and everybody's a suspect, and then after that the person they think it is ends up being killed, and it's like one person after another, so they're trying to figure out the clues and trying to figure out who it was that did it. So I think in a way this movie was interesting, and I didn't give it a high rating either, but because Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler were in it, I give it 3.5
Oh
stars.
wow. No, that's higher than I would have thought. But yeah, you're right. And then at the end, they kind of showed the like a little sign that said the Orient Express, which is another movie that I was kind of like I guess maybe inspired by. I don't know if you've seen the movie Murder on the Orient Express, and it's kind of they remade it, but it was like a classic before, and it's the same thing. Like a murder happens on a train, and then they kind of figure out who the murder really was, and it's all these twists. So this movie was like I guess a lot like it, and like I said, 2.5 stars at the most. And yeah, I didn't really like it. What is an
Obviously.
obviously I didn't like it. And Adam Sandler's disappointed me for a while either. Like also like he's actually done dramas, which I think he's better at. But yeah, what's the next movie you want to mention?
He's like, moving on. Let's
Moving
move
on to
on to this
this.
movie.
Yeah.
So, this movie is one that you picked, so I guess let's have better luck here. He picked Gone Girl, which has Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike, Neil
Hmm.
Patrick Harris, and Tyler Perry. And this movie came out in 2014. So, can you tell us about this movie?
Yes. Well, this movie, I read the book first, which the book was really good. It was by Gillian Flynn. And it's pretty much like about a married couple, and they're like having their. I think that's what happened. I kind of confused the plots a little bit because they're like a little, just that part, I guess. So they're having like their anniversary, and they're kind of struggling. Like the relationship, you can tell that they're struggling, and pretty much the same thing as well, even the Gabby Petito case. Like she ends up missing, and in this case, like or in the story, like Ben Affleck's character, which is Nick, he ends up being like the prime suspect, and they're like all these like stories, and because she had been keeping like a journal, and the cops find her journal, and she has all these stories of how bad a husband he is. Like pretty much
Huh.
everything is pointing to him as being the, like the
It's
guilty party.
the prime.
Yes, exactly. So pretty much that's what this movie is about, and then you're kind of like based on everything, you're like, did he do it? Did he not do it? And it's got twists and turns, but I found it very
Yeah.
interesting. if I had to rate it, which I'm gonna rate it right now, I would say 4 stars, because maybe four. Well, yeah, it's because the decimals. I know you don't like the decimals. I'd say 4 stars. What about you? What was your opinion of the movie?
Most,
Okay,
well,
4.25.
I stick. How what?
4.25.
Oh, you didn't give it that much extra. I thought maybe you had more.
Like a
That's why you
4.5.
wanted to add the decimals. But I give it a flat 4. Because you, like you said, there were twists and turns. It definitely kept your attention, and for sure, like when I'm watching this, I'm feeling exactly what they want me to feel, right?
Right. Yeah, tension
So,
and yeah.
so yeah, I think the husband's a pig. I think I mean, everyone thinks he's guilty, and of course, all those things,
Right.
Then as the story unravels, and you find out there's more psychological stuff going on, and it's just like crazy. So, I think if you haven't seen this movie, you should watch it, just because it's got a lot to it, So,
Definitely.
I give it stars.
How many? 4
So,
stars, right? Okay.
yeah. And then moving on to our next movie that we watched, which was a movie that came out in 1993. And I think it was actually like a TV classic also,
Oh
maybe at
yes.
one time, or at least it was kind of remade. But in 1993, it was The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, also had Tommy Lee Jones, Celia Ward, and Julianne Moore, as well as Joe Pantoliano. And so, what do you think about this movie? And can you tell us about it?
Okay. This movie is a classic for sure, like you were mentioning it, and I had never seen it before. But everywhere that I've kind of like tuned into pop culture, movie talk, and stuff like that, they're always mentioning The Fugitive like as a reference. So this movie I had never seen, and I really enjoyed it. The movie's pretty much like back to the. It seems like the theme of the Gone Girl too. Like Harrison Ford is pretty much accused of murdering his wife, and that's why he's like sent to prison. And something happens that pretty much there's people escape.
He's found guilty.
Yeah,
He's actually found guilty, and I think at some point they're moving him to a maximum security place.
Yes.
And then that's kind of where the movie takes off.
Yeah, yeah, because then there's like several prisoners escape. Well, there's one main prisoner and him escape. And then he becomes a fugitive. So the whole time it's kind of like you're wondering if he did murder his wife or not, because it's kind of like at first it isn't very clear.
I mean, I don't think he's a bad guy. Like, he doesn't escape because he tried or anything. There was an accident.
Yeah.
Where he's trying to save someone else's life that's on there, that's like a security and like that. Like, there's like basically it's an action movie.
Yes.
And the train's gonna hit the vehicle that they were in. It turned over, and somebody like lets him loose and says, "Go! I don't care what you do." So then he goes, and then since he's escaped and they're trying to look for him, he kind of starts investigating what did happen to his wife so that he can figure out, like, I didn't do it. And I keep saying that I didn't, and nobody believes me. So now I'm going to try to figure out who killed my wife, kind of thing.
Right. And the whole time Tommy Lee Jones is like he's after him, pretty much trying to capture him, because he doesn't care. Like he said, he doesn't compromise or he doesn't like negotiate. So the whole time Tommy Lee Jones is after him as he's like, being a fugitive. So but yeah, like I said, this movie was really good. I liked it a lot. I would say also 4.25, 4.5, 4 and 2.5 is my rating. What about yourself? What would you rate it?
Well, I've always said that if it's a movie that I would want to own, I would give it a 5-star rating. And this actually is a movie that we owned.
Oh, nice.
And I've watched it over and over again for years. And it's a classic.
Yeah.
So for me, I give it a 5-star rating.
Nice.
So
That's
it's one of my favorite movies. I don't really watch a lot of action movies, but this is one that I have watched over and over again. And I can watch it and not be tired of it, so.
That's awesome.
5 stars for me.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know when I would give a 5 stars, but that's good. This was close.
Yeah. Well, 0.25. I don't know. I would have gone with higher. And then
4.5. 4.5. So the other one, Gone Girl, is 4.25, and this one 4.5.
Okay. So now we move on to the true crime documentaries that we watched because we actually did watch some documentaries to get away from the absurd, the psychological, and the action-packed murder mysteries. We decided let's go into the true crime realm, and so I watched a movie called Sophie, A Murder in West Cork, which came out this year. But it's a story of a French woman, and she got murdered in 1996, and she's found brutally murdered near her rural Irish home just before Christmas. And this is just like a shocking thing to the community, right? Like, what happened? Why did she get murdered? Who did it? So there's like 3 episodes based on this, and I felt like they didn't need to make 3 episodes. Like, I mean, come on, it could have been in one, right?
Right.
But they wanted to make a docu-series, so they dragged it on. And I think what was interesting about this story was that her husband was the famous French director, and so of course that's why I think she got more like media attention. And of course I think, you know, she was also like pretty, probably in the fashionable and all those things. But I was like, okay, so like what else was special about her? Not that people are not special, but it's just like I was like, why did she get so much attention?
Right.
And it's because one of the people that was investigating her murder, he was like a journalist and he lived near her. Well, he's one of the people that's seen near the crime scene. And later on, he's one of the major suspects. And he ends up being like, I think, pretty much tried, or, you know, for her murder, because they say he's the one that did it. Like, you know how you see those movies where there's a writer and then there's a murder, and maybe later on the writer had to do a lot with the murder. So like the thing is that he was a prime suspect and he didn't know that he was gonna be, but he ends up being that. And but the thing I didn't like either is that you don't really discover much else. Like, it's still like an unsolved case. Or even though he's the prime suspect, it's not like they've like indicted him or anything. So it's like still up in the air and there's no resolution. So to me, I give this a 2.5 stars, which is kind of low.
Right. Yeah. So till this day, like, you don't know if he did it or not then? Like, pretty much that's what it leaves you off on, like a cliffhanger type?
Well, the thing is that they actually interview him too, and then there's neighbors that say that he said he did it, and then there's neighbors that say that he was the kind of person that howled at the moon, and that he was just weird, and that he was a violent person with the people that he'd been with, and all these things, you know. Right. So then you're like, okay, does that all add up to him being the murderer in this case, or does that just add up to him being who he is and at the wrong place at the wrong time?
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know what to think. And I feel like if there was someone else and they were just focused on him, then they missed out on details that maybe they could have had to solve this. I don't know.
Wow. That reminds me of another like documentary, but I can mention it later, or just I'll just mention it to people that have seen it before. That reminds me a lot of like the Making a Murder that was on Netflix, which is kind of very... It reminds me of that, like a person, like apparently being at the wrong time, at the wrong place at the wrong time, and then being like tried for it and paying the. Well, this guy was actually like in jail and everything, so that's pretty interesting though.
Okay, yeah. So then now we're talking about the one that you chose to watch, because I told you don't watch this, don't even waste your time on it, because like it's long. They shouldn't have made it so long, and it could be a good book if you pick the right material or the info for it. But I'm just like, just watch something else, which you did. You watched American Murder: The Family Next Door, which came out in 2020. So can you tell us what this is about and how much of a rating you give it? Like, what's your rating?
Yeah, okay. Well, since you're kind of familiar with this case also, if you can help me out if I need it. So pretty much this was like the Watts family. His name is Chris Watts, and the wife was named Shannon Watts, and pretty much it's almost like the same thing. She was like also involved in social media. She had lupus, and they met like through that, I guess. Like, he would follow her, I guess, her YouTube or her Instagram, her stories, and then I guess on Facebook he friend requested her one time, and then from there they got to know each other. They loved each other, and they got married. They had 2 kids, which are Cece and Bella. and pretty much as it goes, she ended up, well, missing after a certain point, and he pretty much is the main suspect, which is like that's usually how it goes. Like whenever there's a missing person, they always look at the husband or the partner, like they're always kind of like seen as the primary suspect, you know. So it was interesting. Like I don't know if you want me to give more away about it, because I mean you listened to the podcast about it too, like years ago with Ashley Flowers and that Crime Junkie podcast. So I don't know if you want to talk more about it.
Oh, it wasn't years ago that I heard it, because I started listening to Ashley Flowers last year.
Oh, okay.
But I just kind of binged and caught up, and then so when I heard this case, because I decided, well, maybe I'll watch it. Louis says that I should, so I was watching it. I'm like, this sounds so familiar, and I knew she'd done a case. And in my opinion, I think that she did a better job than this Netflix documentary did. Like to me, this was okay. Like this is like they use a lot of the footage around the house and things like that. And to me, I thought I would give this a 3 for a rating, but for her podcast, I would go with a 4.5, maybe even a 5-star rating,
Wow.
because I thought she just did a great job explaining really what happened, and you kind of just get the shivers, and just it's so sad. This story is like super sad. So I said, you have to listen to her version of it, because I think she does a better job explaining it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, about that, like since I watched this documentary first, I thought it was very interesting because the fact that they use like all this live, like the footage, actual footage, because it was pretty much, there was no narrator really. It was all based on events. They would kind of like read the text messages that were sent back and forth. They showed like the interview with him, you know, when the cops were interviewing him. So everything was just kind of there, and I thought that was good. Like my rating would be 3.75 for both of them, like the podcast and this. And then when I heard the podcast, they did give more information, like as far as their opinions and more detail that wasn't really covered in the documentary itself. But I think if you watch them together, that's a very good like complement to each other. So, but the story itself is very sad. So. I don't know if you want to give it away what happens, or I mean it's like, and this happened in 2018. This was like I think August of 2018.
Yeah, and Ashley Flowers' podcast, that if anybody wants to look it up, Crime Junkie did the episode, I think on December 24th of 2018.
Right.
And the story is basically about this husband who pretty much lives a double life. You know, the wife just keeps wanting to make him happy. And you just think, you know, maybe maybe something like it basically has to do with him having problems with finances and him like living a double life, and you want him to be innocent because he sounds like he could be, but
yeah, and that was the thing too, because in the documentary they didn't really touch up too much on the finances that I remember. And it was on the Ashley Flowers podcast that they kind of mentioned, that they had filed for bankruptcy like 4 years earlier, and then like I don't remember that being in the documentary and stuff. And also like, I mean, not that it's bad not to exercise, right? Well, like when you're married, but apparently like a lot of times when one of the, I mean, I don't want to say anything or start anything up, right? But apparently when one of the two starts really focusing on their fitness or their body, losing weight and stuff, because he lost. He was like 245 and he went to 185, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, I don't know, like almost 80 pounds or something. So, or 60 some pounds. I'm bad with my math right now, but he lost a lot of weight. And it's kind of like, you know, the cops asked him, like, one of the first questions they asked him when she went missing is like, well, you know, do you have another woman, or, you know, like, why is it that you're losing weight and stuff? And I mean, that's kind of like a red flag, which I didn't really realize it was, but I mean, that's kind of interesting from this, you know. And I don't know if you want to give it away, but pretty much do I tell him what really happened? Or at the end?
Say that it was a brutal murder of his wife and his kids, and like, I mean, like, it's shocking. I think most people that follow true crime, they will know what happened. So to me, I guess you could say, but then let's just continue on, because I mean, this story is just sad, you know.
Right. Well, yeah, it is sad. I mean, I know spoilers are for movies, but this is like a real thing. But yeah, okay. So let's continue on then.
Yeah. But if you want to know more about the case, it's about like what's his name again? Chris
Chris
Watts.
Watts, yeah, Watts.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a sad story and it happened in 2018. And like you said, August seems to be the month where a lot of crime happens, like murders and that kind of thing. And so that one happened in August, right?
Right. Yeah, because there's in the podcast, Ashley Flowers and her co-host, they were kind of talking about different little like patterns when it comes to like cases like these. They call it family destroyers or family annihilators, right? I think it's family annihilators, which are the cases where like the husband or one of the partners pretty much, like annihilates the family, like by killing the wife and the kids, or the partner and the children.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, the next thing is that they commit suicide also. But in this case, he didn't. In this case, like, I guess, right. I just give it away there. So, but pretty much he had a
Yeah.
mistress. He did the whole thing because he wanted a new life. And so that's,
Yeah.
and then they said that was the pattern also. Like it usually happens in August. It's usually the men doing it. And I don't know why
Mhm.
August of all months, but it's just an interesting fact. And that also, like the Gabby Petito, that was also in August, which was August 27 is when she first the last time people saw her with alive was August 27. So I don't know what it is about that month.
Yeah. And about your story that you did or the
Hmm.
documentary that you watched,
Hmm.
she is pregnant. So
Right.
once again, it's called American Murder: The Family Next Door.
Right.
So she's pregnant, and it seems
Yeah.
to me like a lot of pregnant women get murdered by their
Wow.
husbands, you
That's
know?
crazy. Right.
Something happens where, yeah, this happens.
No, it's super sad. Yeah.
So speaking of August murders, let's move on to the Gabby Petito one, which I guess might probably have happened in August or at least maybe early September, but we're assuming it probably happened in August because I think that's when she was last seen. So, what do you want to tell us about this? Anything further, or do you have anything else you want to add about it?
Well, yeah. I've seen videos on YouTube where people think it could have been prevented, because like before her murder, like somebody had spotted like a couple arguing, and then like the guy slapped the woman around, and so like the cops showed up, or they kind of went to investigate, and it was Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, and pretty much there, like Gabby was crying and very emotional, and she was like saying, "Oh, it was my fault," like apologizing to the cops. And then I might say is like the wrong name at times, but Brian, Brian seemed like calm, and he kind of like tried to play it off, and even the cops, they were kind of like more like friendly towards him. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they were
For
like,
true.
yeah, so they were kind of more like frat guys kind of thing, like almost downplaying, that it was a real issue. So, and the cops never really seemed to check up on her. If anything, ironically, like they thought that she was the one committing like the domestic violence. So, I don't know. It was just kind of
They, they
like, hmm.
she was almost like the aggressor in their
Exactly.
view of things. They just acted like, but to me, that's kind of funny because she's like a small
Yeah.
girl. I mean, she's like just small compared to him
Right.
and just skinny and like, come on, like, really, you think she's gonna be the aggressor? But that's kind of how they took it because she was apologizing so much and saying, I'm so sorry, it was my fault. I did this. I made him mad, all these things, right?
Hmm.
And my sources, most of my sources come from, of course, Nancy Grace. I also watched HLN. I did listen to the Ashley Flowers podcast on her. And so a lot of that is where my information is coming from. But to me, it's just funny because Brian Laundrie, they said, like, this is something that I heard recently, had episodes where he heard voices, okay?
Uh,
So, I mean, I think that's kind of something creepy
yes.
already, or just makes you aware that maybe he had mental problems. And
Right.
it seemed like maybe both of them were on meds, but neither of them seemed to have been taking whatever meds it is that they needed for whatever issues they may have had.
That's so
So
crazy.
I think this could have played a lot into why things kind of started unraveling, you know?
Yes. Oh, definitely. And I didn't know that. So, I mean, there's side effects
Mm-hmm.
to taking like taking anxiety medication, and then there's also side effects like when you take it, then you get off it. So, I mean, on top of that, if they were like both like not taking their medications, like that's not a good sign at all. And then on top of that, like some of her friends mentioned that he was very controlling of her. So, and even then, like a big red flag when the cops were like pulling them, or when the cops were talking to them about that first domestic violence case, like the fact that she was like apologizing and kind of like trying not to like anger him, that's a sign that he's got power over her to a certain extent. Like she's afraid of him or making him angry. You know what I mean? So that could have been handled a lot
Yeah.
differently. And I've seen like people's analyzing it, different things. So, but you know how it is. Like people after the fact, like like what was it? We're talking about that too. Like the whole social media. What are they, like internet sleuthers? I think they call them. Because there's a lot of people right now like trying to break every little a piece of the case down, like based on all her videos, even the music they were listening to, like like everybody's super
Right.
interested in this case. So yeah, there's a lot that could have
Right.
been
Right.
done. Yeah, I don't, what else do you have to say about it?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that Brian Laundrie threatened to leave Gabby behind while
Right.
she was alive. So, I mean, this is kind of crazy because it was her van
Yeah.
that he was in. He didn't pay for any of it. It was her stuff that she paid for.
Right.
And so she was already afraid that he would do just as he said, which eventually he did leave her behind. Obviously, later on we find out that he goes home and leaves her and nobody knows where she is. She's missing. Later on they find her. But I feel that before he left, I feel like maybe he didn't completely kill her, but he hurt her enough to like just make her so she couldn't move, like
Right.
incapacitate her
Right. Wow.
and basically to humiliate her and terrify her.
Mm.
And then he just kind of left her clinging to life. That's how I feel that if he did this, which I'm
Wow.
almost feeling that he did, um, that's probably the way that he did it. And they say, and I'm not sure if this is true, but some people are saying that he flew home first. Like he
Wow.
went and flew home to probably his parents where he lived, and I think she lived with them as well before they went on this trip. And then maybe after he revealed what happened or what he did to her, maybe he told his parents, then maybe his conscience kind of got the best of him, and then
Mm.
he maybe flew back to the scene and drove the van home. I mean, that's kind of like what I'm seeing might have
Wow.
happened based on them saying that it seems like he flew home first. Like I imagine that if he just left her clinging to life, that's what he did. He just like got out of there and then later on was like, maybe I should go check on her and
That's
see
crazy.
what happened, and then it
Wow.
was too late and then he just drove home, and that could be part of the scenario for all we know.
Yeah. Well, I know there's like
So,
there's a lot of theories going on right now, since all this is like, currently, not it's not closed yet, so and that's the thing that we're going to talk about too. Like right now there's a warrant for his arrest, but it's not like not saying that he murdered her, but that's the only thing they can kind of like pin on him, since he used her debit card to purchase items, right? So that in itself is a crime, and that's what they're kind of following.
mhm.
Like he's being wanted for that, but that's kind of like what is that's what the cops are using, or the police are using, so that they can kind of bring him in and then like investigate if he murdered her or not, which is like at this point is very
Well,
likely.
the yeah, well, the thing is that they haven't been able to find out much
Hmm.
about him from the
Hmm.
beginning because whenever police wanted to question him about Gabby missing and disappearing when they didn't know like where she was or any of that,
Right.
he wasn't being helpful at all. And the only thing they got from him was a note
Mm.
handed to them telling them to talk to his lawyer. Don't you think that
Mm.
kind of sounds shady and suspicious? I
Oh
mean, like,
yeah,
come on. Like,
exactly.
seriously, after they get that, which is kind of like giving them the hand or the finger, then he just kind of just saunters off, walks away into who knows where, and just disappears. So
Exactly.
he's kind of maddening, and I can see why people would be like, let's just find this guy because I mean, he's done so many things wrong, including not talk and just act like he can do what he wants, basically, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And
So,
there was something too, like the apparently like when the parents first, I guess the parents reported her missing like in September 11th, and then like, but the last time that they saw her alive was or anybody saw her alive was that August 27th, and it was kind of like at a they were at a restaurant, and they were like apparently they were giving they got kicked out of a restaurant because they were like being very causing a scene or very being very rude to the staff, so whatever restaurant they were in, they were kicked out of it. And then like that she was kind of
but it
sitting,
wasn't being rude. It wasn't them, it was him.
yeah.
It was him causing a scene. She was apologizing as
Oh
always. She was
wow.
like, "I'm so sorry." And they said that, like, this witness said
Uh-huh.
that he came in like four times to kind of
Oh
just
wow.
yell at the wait staff and like tell them off, or I don't know exactly what they were fighting over, if it was money or the food or what. But Gabby was kind of like, "I'm sorry,"
Oh wow.
like probably like this is just how he is and like
That's
that kind of
crazy.
thing. So she was trying to cover up for him anytime she got
Wow.
a chance because of how he was. So it's kind of
Wow.
sad.
That's crazy because
And
that's
okay,
uh-huh.
yeah,
Because that's what I saw. Like
go.
that there was like back to the whole like social media being a big part of this case. Like the people that I guess later on, like when they saw that she was missing on TV, they were like, "Oh, those that was the couple that was at the restaurant," and I guess the guy was like being like a jerk and everything. But I didn't know he had done that, like gone back in several times because I just heard that like she was like sitting on the side of the street or there on the sidewalk, and he was just yelling, and I guess yelling at the staff or whoever. So but this couple, like when they saw him or they saw the news story, they're like, "Hey, that's that couple," and they're like, "Oh wow, we might have been the last people to see her alive." And also about social media, like social media has been like all over this case. Like people are always trying to find out, like investigate themselves, right? And a good one or a good reason or a good thing that happened with it is that there was a couple from Florida also, and they were like in that area, and they saw the van and they saw the license plates were from Florida, and they're like, "Oh man, we should really like, say hi," since they were excited because this was in Wyoming, and to find another like van from Florida, they were like, "We should say hi," but there was nobody in the van when they went. And then later on, when they saw the story in the news, they're the ones that tipped off the police and told them, "Oh, we saw this van over here in this because the area that the van was in is very like disclosed, right? And you can get like it's not easy to find somebody if somebody went missing there, but thanks to these people, the cops knew where to look, and that's how they were able to find the body. So that's been a very good thing. And I know there's all these kind of tips right now, like from people giving stories and theories and everything, and there's always good and bad, but I think that the social media or the internet, the sleuthers in this case, they've been very helpful.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, I'm just looking at this case and thinking about how she wanted to be well known and
Right.
maybe even famous, but sadly and ironically, what she most
Mm-hmm.
wanted came to pass, right? And I mean, it's so sad that like I said, like what she wanted has happened,
Mm-hmm.
but now she's not around. And I kind of feel like if her fiance had anything to do with this, I'm sure he could never have imagined so many eyes on him,
Oh
and
yeah.
now he has managed to disappear for the time being. But I feel like because of everybody's attention being on this, it'll kind of be kind of hard for him to hide, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, I wanted to mention before I go into like why it's hard for him or them to hide or just kind of pretend this didn't happen. Before that, I wanted to mention another ironic fact about this story or another case.
Uh-huh.
Um, so aside from being found murdered at the Great Tetons, there were also two other people killed there just
Mm.
before Gabby went missing. So they're wondering, is this coincidence, or did the same person who killed
Oh.
Gabby kill all of them? So like if it was the guy, is he a serial killer? Did he kill them and then Gabby? Is this why he killed her? Or was there more happening, or was this another person that might have
Mm-hmm.
killed, like those two people and then Gabby, or was it two separate incidents? But in any case, it's kind of like weird that they happen so close to each other and around the same time.
Wow,
So
that's interesting.
that was, yeah, definitely. But our eyes are all on this, and like I mentioned, technology has played a huge role, like you did too. Social media, TikTok. Then, of course, like I said, smartphones, tablets, GPS, the smart watches. They mentioned that she wore one and
Mm,
that maybe she was wearing it during the time when the incident happened. Or if she didn't, then there was it could have been in the van, and then that could give a lot of tips or information that the cops need. But then, of course, we have the video surveillance and footage from eyewitnesses with their own devices, as well as Gabby and her fiance's
right.
devices, you know. So
Right.
a lot for the FBI and the police to be looking into,
Oh yeah, for
the
sure.
detectives.
Yeah.
So,
Well, for sure, this will be
and
like a lifetime movie whenever it's resolved. It's like
yeah,
set for that for sure. It's super interesting, and there's so much like footage of it. So I'm sure this would be like one of those movie of the weeks kind of thing, and it's very tragic for sure.
right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And her All Trails app said at one point that she was in Puerto Rico.
Oh wow.
So I'm wondering if maybe Brian Laundrie is there because obviously we know that she didn't go there.
Right.
The only person that traveled after she died was him, you know. So did he go to Puerto Rico, or did Brian Laundrie's parents help him escape to Cuba? That's the
Oh
other
wow.
question that people are wondering about because they say that it would be easy for him, like if he went to Cuba on a plane, obviously he'd be easily detected. But that they said that there was this TikTok video of him on a boat,
Oh wow.
and they mentioned that he went, but I don't know if this is like true or if this is just who knows. But they said that there was video footage that went live from his account of him being on a boat by accident, like this video went off.
Oh wow.
And if he was on a boat, he'd be harder to trace than if he was on an airplane.
Right.
But this boat could have been headed towards Cuba, and he could be there, or he could be where his parents told everyone to search, which I
Mm.
doubt, or he could be somewhere completely different, but here in the U.S. So we
Hmm.
don't know yet. But I feel like with the technology and everything,
Yeah.
he's not gonna be able to hide forever.
Yeah. No. No. He
So
shouldn't be exactly. And that's the thing too. We were kind of talking about how he had like a 2 week head start since they never like actually reported anything. Like even though he knew she was missed or like, well, obviously, right? Like he had pretty much like 2 weeks of not doing anything about it. So that's why it's very suspicious. Like he could be in any of those places right now for that reason, itself that he never said anything. And his family too. His parents are actually being very, well, I don't know. Are they accomplices at this point, or what can be like charged against them? Like if they know, because I don't know. There's kind of one of those things that you can incriminate yourself. Like I don't know what the law says about that. But it's
they
just,
got charged for withholding information because they knew stuff, and they
mm-hmm,
even had to search their homes, and because she lived there as well, so they were
mm-hmm,
searching for anything that could help the FBI and that. And then a neighbor, one of their neighbors, said that they actually got like an RV or
uh
something
huh.
like that, where the whole family, which would be him and his parents, disappeared for a time,
Oh wow.
and then he supposedly left his
Vehicle.
car
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah, and then they went to pick it up.
Yeah.
So I feel like they took him
Yes.
somewhere between all of them, and then they came back, and then they acted like they didn't know what was going on, but they suddenly had to go pick up his vehicle. So
Exactly. Yeah.
they're a lot more involved than they want to
Yes.
think the police know. But I mean, whatever's going on, it's gonna get things get tracked easily now
Yeah.
with technology and everything else, you
Yeah.
know.
And
So
everything comes out to light. So sooner or later, this gonna be resolved. Oh, that's the hope. So
for sure. So I don't know if you have anything more to say about this particular case, but I know that as a society we're very interested in these kind of situations and these kind of stories, you know.
yeah. Well,
So
about that is just one last thing, and this would be like the last thing that I would like kind of want to ask you too about it, or about like they call it the white, what is it, the missing white woman privilege syndrome. I don't know if that's like the right way, but it's pretty much people are already kind of like, well, there's always people with all kinds of opinions, obviously. So some people are saying like if she hadn't been like white, if she hadn't been attractive, if she, would this have been as big a case as it is right now? Like And a lot of people have said that or complained about that because there's like people that go missing all the time, but they're like minorities and stuff like that. So why emphasize this case over others? And I think the reason for it is like the social media presence itself. Since she was like a budding, social media star, like that already sets it apart. But like to a certain extent, like it is sad to say, but I think even like the looks of like the appearance, like I think that does captivate the media more too. So I do think there is something to it. It's kind of, I don't know what you think about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think we were a little bit talking about it off air, and I was saying that, like, how would it, like, if either you or I got
Uh-huh.
murdered, I think we would be like average people because,
Right.
um, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we would get murdered
I hope
because, like I
not.
said, we're both visually impaired and we don't,
Right.
hopefully, nobody
Yeah.
wants to murder us or
Exactly.
anything.
Right. Right.
But, like, I think, a lot of things helped this situation out. Like you said,
Hmm.
it was the media for sure. Like the coverage has been on her because she did have a lot more videos, and but then like you said, like a lot of people are saying that it's because of her looks and everything, and I think that plays a great big part on that, because if they're gonna make a movie about
Hmm.
this, they're gonna want to do it about someone who looks a certain way and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So it's sad, but a lot of people who are attractive usually can get further in life,
Yeah.
and also I think it helps them when they die too.
Right.
Not that it's really going to help them much, except for it's going to maybe help to capture the
Right.
person and that kind of thing. But
Right. Right.
I think all of it has helped. I
Hmm.
don't think it's one or
Yeah.
another,
I think so too.
but it definitely has in her case. So
Yeah. Right.
that's what I think.
No, I agree.
So. Mhm. So now, because we talked about this and we talked about the movies earlier, I was wondering if you've watched TV shows, that are based on murder mysteries or any of that kind of thing. Because I have a list of TV channels and shows dedicated to murder mysteries. Because I think this is a subject that's
Oh
fascinating to a
yes.
lot of people in culture. It's sad when it happens in real life, but we kind of feel like we should be able to solve this or other mysteries that are happening. So I think that's our thing with being fascinated with these things, is that we feel like maybe we can figure it out, or help to figure it out.
Right.
And we want, because we want to put the bad guys behind bars and that sort of thing. So do you know of any fascinating TV shows that are out there or that you've seen or know about?
Well, three that I've watched, they're all on Netflix. So these are the one I mentioned earlier, Making a Murderer. So that was like a true crime, documentary on Netflix, and that was very super interesting. And I know it was even trending for a good while. Like people were very into it. So that one, Making a Murder, is one, and then there was Don't F with Cats, and it was like the bad word. It said don't and then F, with cats, and this was the same thing. Like this person was like pretty much he killed like a cat on video, and he never showed his face or anything. And based on that, like all these internet sleuthers like were trying to figure out who's this guy and stuff. And first it was a cat, and then eventually it was like a person. So it was very interesting, and it's on Netflix also. And then the last one's Evil Genius, and this was about this guy that went into a bank one time, and he had like a bomb around his neck, like one of those homemade bombs, and he said like, give me all your money pretty much, or this bomb's gonna go off. And there was a lot to it, like people behind the scenes and all this story. So that was a also very interesting documentary. So those are the three that I have seen, and I would recommend those three. And again, those were Making a Murderer, Don't F with Cats, spelling the bad word out, and then Evil Genius. So those are the ones that I would actually recommend watching. What about you? I know you have a lot more. What shows or channels would you recommend people watch or check out?
Haven't seen all of these TV shows, but I know that they're based on, crime dramas. So I have Bones, Criminal Minds, which I have seen, and my mom used to watch a lot. So, I think it's interesting, but it's kind of creepy too. Then there's CSI. I've heard of Dexter. I've watched Law and Order, which I think is interesting. It just has a lot of the, like some of the stuff
Hmm.
based on like true life events
Yeah.
that they used for that show. Then there's NCIS, and then for the lighter stuff, I think Hallmark Mysteries. of course, has some of the older shows like Diagnosis Murder, Matlock, Monk, and Murder, She Wrote. And then here's a channel that my common law sister-in-law and I used to watch. And it's ID, which is Investigation Discovery. And for a
Right.
while, she was watching it so much that she said that my brother was afraid that she'd be able to murder him and get away with it
Uh,
because she just knew so much stuff, So, but there's a lot of true crime shows. Basically, I mean, there's Dateline, NBC. A lot of times, if you can't watch like those kind of shows, there's also the podcasts that go with it.
mhm.
I know that Dateline has a podcast as well. Then there's Dr. G, Medical Examiner, Evil lives here, 48 hours. I like Forensic Files because it's super short and yet it covers like from the beginning who did it as well as like how did they do it. And then there's Killer Kids and Unsolved Mysteries has been on since forever. And I used to watch that when I was really young. I used to
Mhm.
be home alone and it used to creep me out. But especially I think at that time the host was like maybe William Shatner
Uh,
and he had a creepy voice, but I would be home alone and I'd want to see what happened. So I would watch it back in the day. But there is so much that we can watch nowadays and
right.
like I said, channels dedicated to that, like the ID channel, is just that. It's all
Mhm.
about true crime stories and that kind of thing. So we have choices and options. Like even with podcasts, like I said, Ashley Flowers has a couple of them, which is Crime Junkie and International Infamy, and then Nancy Grace has a podcast. And there are just a lot more. Like I don't even want to list them because there's just so much, and you can find
Right.
them anytime anywhere pretty much. So yeah, so that's it for today. We hope that you have I can't say enjoyed it, but have maybe heard something new that you didn't before, and that it makes you just be more aware of your surroundings and the people that are around you, because sometimes you don't know who's gonna end up being kind of shady. I mean, I guess that's me. Like with
Uh-huh.
listening to all these things, I kind of think everyone's shady, but I don't think it's a bad thing to just be more aware of your
Exactly.
surroundings, the people that you're around, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, but anyway, hopefully we have a lighter show next time, but for this time we decided to do this because of what's been going on in the news and like just our interest. Well, mainly my interest. This time I picked this genre, and I'm really big into like these podcasts, like true crime stories. But I've learned a lot from them, honestly. So I think it's a good thing to continue to learn in life. So that's why I keep listening and watching some of these things. So
Definitely.
anyway, it's been good talking to you about it, Luis. I don't. Do
Likewise.
you have
Until next time.
anything else?
No, well, just
Yeah. Until
everything.
next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Just everything you said is right on. Like, if nothing else, just be extra careful. Just be extra cautious, extra careful, and just, I don't know. That's never a
Yeah.
bad thing to be extra careful.
Yep. Yep. For sure. All right. Until next time.
All right. Until next time, y'all take care.